Hello and a very warm welcome to Insight. I'm Amandra Bhatt. Today we talk about the latest in relations between India and Pakistan in the light of the rising tensions at the line of control. Remember, there have been 24 incidents of ceasefire violations by Pakistan every day of the last fortnight. The Indian Army too has foiled several bids by militants to cross over into India under the cover of fire. Meanwhile, Defence Minister A.K. Antony took a tough stand against Pakistan in Parliament yesterday. He said that Pakistan must not take India's restraint for granted. He also parked ties. Today in Insight, we discuss whether or not the two countries can survive this latest test. And to discuss the same, we are joined in our studios by two distinguished guests. Please welcome Mr. Rajiv Sikri, who's a renowned diplomat, a former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. Welcome to Insight, Mr. Sikri. We are also joined by Dr. D. Subhachandran, who's a director with the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies. Welcome to Insight, Dr. Subhachandran. And later in the program, we'll be joined by senior journalist Pramit Pal Chaudhary. Mr. Sikri, I'd like to begin with you. How do you look at the Defence Minister's statement in Parliament yesterday, taking a firm stand against Pakistan, saying that our restraint should not be taken for granted? Finally, can we say that India is toughening its stand?
Well, I think this was overdue. What was a surprise was his original statement, which seemed to take all responsibility away from the Pakistani army. I think what he has said today is a more realistic position, which would have carried more credibility had it been enunciated on day one itself. Secondly, I think that from the reports one is getting, and there are many TV channels who have the correspondence on the ceasefire line, I think the Indian Army has been told to give a robust response, which implies, and this again has come out in the media, that the local commanders felt themselves constrained not to take action.
Right.
So I think that was a wrong policy. So if that policy has changed and the army has been told, this is what General Bikram Singh, our army chief, had said in January when the incident of the beheading took place.
Right.
But somehow one gets the impression that the people at the top, because it does not fit into a preconceived policy that we must improve our relationship with Pakistan, therefore you try and determine what is going to happen on the ground based on your broad framework, whereas I believe that it should be the other way around. Of course, you need a policy at the top, but the ground realities have to be taken into account in crafting that policy.
Dr. Subhachandran, the government though says that the army is mandated to take whatever action it sees fit to respond to the evolving situation at the LOC, whereas the policy would be decided by New Delhi. Do you think that's the right approach for us?
So that has been the case for a long time. I think that standard operating procedure in case of a ceasefire violation, it has to be very clear. It should not have come to Prime Minister in the first place to take a political decision. It should have been a military decision at the line of control between two forces, and whatever responses we should have taken on day one itself. This entire process for responding to a ceasefire violation, coming to Parliament and discussing in Parliament and media, this takes a longer time, and it's unacceptable. So at the ground level, the commander should be well aware what the standard operating procedures are if there is a violation, if there is a ceasefire violation.
Okay, but if we could examine the situation at the LOC, just how bad the situation is there, because we understand the past few weeks have been some of the most tense in recent times, and we also know that for the first time in 14 years since the Kargil war, Pakistani troops have violated the ceasefire in the high reaches of Ladakh.
It's doing now because of violation of what is happening, what is generally believed as the holding the ceasefire for the last many years, especially since the agreement was reached in 2004 and 5. So the real issue is not what's happening in terms of firing or killing. The real issue is what is the motivation behind these killings.
Right.
So that's where we have to be worried about. You know, we at the national level sitting in Delhi and our military, which is guarding the fence at the ground level. What is the larger objective behind these firing? Where are they aimed at?
Okay. Okay, Mr. Sikri, would you like to address this question? We had a ceasefire which was by and large maintained. By and large it was peaceful. Now, can we say that it is over or on the verge of being over? And what's driving these latest series of ceasefire violations?
I think that while it may not be formally over, certainly the level of activity on the ceasefire line has it's logical to come to the conclusion that it's not holding. It's very, very frail now. And the question is whether we can go back to the earlier situation or the situation is likely to get worse.
Right.
Now, what is behind this? I think there are two factors. One is the Afghanistan situation, where the Pakistanis are feeling a little more secure. They feel that the Americans need their assistance in order to get their troops and material out safely. So whenever the American-Pakistani relationship is in good shape, then the Pakistanis always feel emboldened that they can try some adventures on this side. Secondly, I think we have to look at the background of Mr. Nawaz Sharif.
Signal that it is very much in control.
Absolutely.
And it is the army ultimately which decides Pakistan's India policy. On that note, we have to take a break in the program. Stay with us, we'll be right back. With Pakistan in the light of rising tensions. Pal Chaudhary, a foreign editor with the Hindustan Times. Welcome to Insight, Mr. Pal Chaudhary. We are discussing the situation at the line of control and its implications for India-Pakistan relations. You know, we were discussing how for the first time in 14 years, Pakistan forces have opened fire on the Kargil front. Just how serious the situation on the line of control is according to you, and can we still call it a ceasefire, because still some time ago it was relatively quiet?
Well, keep in mind that before the ceasefire, before 2003, the degree of violence on the LOC was much higher. I mean, we were looking at almost somewhere between, on average, 400 soldiers being killed. We're clearly nowhere close to that. But if you look at the period between 2003 till about 2011, we had the death toll fell to sometimes just the single digits. Right now, we've had a spike in infiltration, the highest in roughly 2 years.
Right.
We've had the first a resurrection of Lashkar activity in Kashmir for the first time in 3.5 years. And we have seen the number of LOC incidents spike again high in 3 years.
Right.
In addition, what you've mentioned, we're starting to see Pakistani acts in areas that did not originally have, we didn't originally have problems with. All of this clearly indicates that if nothing else, Pakistan is now beginning to test us. They're feeling the confidence now within the Pakistani army, and I think for me at least crucially, I think that is the removal of the U.S. troops from Afghanistan, has led the sense that they had initially deployed 150,000 troops on the Afghan border. Those troops are now slowly going to become free. The Pakistani military, in fact, said as tensions with India increase, we are prepared to begin transferring troops from the Afghan border to India. In addition, there's a sense that the Taliban, or their Taliban, will be in power in the 1980s, maybe a slightly lighter version, but nonetheless one that is in Pakistan's interest. And finally, a sense in the military that Musharraf had carried out a series of negotiations with us through the back channel, which were basically designed or based on the premise that Pakistan, it was too expensive domestically for Pakistan to maintain a state of hostility to India. All the evidence indicates that Kayani, his successor, did not agree with Musharraf at all. That Musharraf conceded far too much, that there was no need, there is a need to maintain a state of hostility with Kayani, as I think, is now beginning to implement that policy. And then finally, we had the interview with Hafiz Saeed, the head of Lashkar, I think just a few weeks ago, where he made it very clear. He said, as the jihad in Afghanistan quietens down, the jihad in Kashmir will be resurrected, and the Mujahideen who are fighting there will now be shifted back to Kashmir, and he will not be saying this without clear military support.
So are you saying as the end game approaches in Afghanistan, concerns are going to rise for India, but
Well, I think there's a whole set of, there's a context to this. It's also the fact, the sense that India is weakening, that China, Pakistan's closest ally, is still emerging as an even more powerful player in Asia. And America has basically lost interest in AFPAC. It doesn't seem to have a policy anymore. So
the
therefore,
attacks took place, and especially the August 6th episode where 5 Indian soldiers were killed. It happened just when the two sides were working on finalizing the dates for secretary level talks.
It's based on the premise that India-Pakistan dialogue under the political leadership has continued to the level that we may want to continue at the civil society level in both the countries. But it hasn't been the case. But that military wants to destroy, or military wants to upset any political dialogue between India and Pakistan led by Nawaz Sharif is based on the understanding that the previous experience that military had with Nawaz Sharif was not a comfortable one. Perhaps the military and the ISA did not expect that Nawaz Sharif will come back to power with such a support, such a popular support. So they didn't expect that, so perhaps they did not plan it. Now Nawaz Sharif has come back to power with a solid support behind the people, the civil society kind of supporting Nawaz Sharif. Perhaps a section within the military and the ISA thinks it's not in their interest to let Nawaz Sharif lead an India-Pakistan dialogue. But more importantly, what should be important from an Indian perspective is to find the larger construct that Pakistan military has vis-a-vis India, Pakistan and India. That's where what Pramit said makes sense. What is the larger idea of Pakistan now about India, Pakistan and India particular? Ambassador Sikri talked about US-Pakistan relations getting better and Pakistan feeling confident on the Durand line side. The more confident it feels, it would be willing to shift its troops to the eastern side. And if Pakistan is planning to have an understanding on China, or if China is planning to use Pakistan as a stooge, because of the larger consideration that the Chinese has, that Indians are falling in the lap of the Americans thanks to the American pivot Indo-US nuclear deal, that India is moving towards India.
Okay.
So these are the three large factors that would lead India-Pakistan relations in the coming days.
But what can we expect, considering General Kayani will step down in November? Pakistan is going to have a new army chief. Policy is so tense.
Well, I think Mr. Nawaz Sharif, at one level, does want better relations with India, particularly on the trade and economic side. He's a businessman. He understands instinctively that would help the business community in Pakistan and himself personally. Also that given the state of Pakistan's economy, it makes sense to do more trading with India, because that would bring down the costs of many of their products and so forth. But on the other hand, Mr. Nawaz Sharif is also somebody who is very committed to the cause of Kashmir.
Right.
I don't think that's an issue he has ever given up or is likely to give up. He's also very sympathetic and supportive of the fundamentalist elements in Pakistan. So these are the elements, and when you say that, oh, but he is keen on a good relationship with India, the question that comes to our mind is, well, if he and his party want a good relationship with India, then why couldn't they have prevented the National Assembly of Pakistan from passing that resolution, which they did?
Right.
Everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon, so I think they want to run with the hares and hunt with the hounds. And in any case, till Mr. Nawaz Sharif sorts out his equation with the military, his words don't carry much credibility, and we should not be going only by what he says, but I think what is the actual situation on the ground. It's okay also for our Prime Minister to say, but we must have a strong, stable Pakistan. But if a strong, stable Pakistan is one which is reviving Kashmir, which is funding terrorism, then I'm afraid that that's to change the situation in favor of those who, real power in favor of those who want a better relationship with India. Because for many years, we thought that General Musharraf was a great idea.
Right.
And we were supporting him, much to the consternation of the Peace Brigade in Pakistan. What are you doing supporting General Musharraf? We worked out a deal with General Musharraf, the back channel deal in 2007-8, which the civilian governments have denounced.
Right.
So, the internal equations in Pakistan have to be such that, those who wield real power want a better relationship with India. And it's no point in our saying that we want a strong and stable Pakistan. The question we have to ask is, do they want a strong and stable India?
Right.
The answer clearly is no. They are wanting to disrupt India, to weaken India, to take advantage of India. Now, under these circumstances, the policies that we follow will have to be very carefully considered.
Okay, so you're saying our policy will have to be renegotiated. We have. Welcome back to Inside. We are talking about tensions at the line of control and whether or not India and Pakistan can survive the test of this latest strain. Mr. Pal Chaudhary, when Nawaz Sharif came to power, there was a lot of optimism in India. This time round, and many believe that if we wanted to normalize relations with Pakistan, he was our best bet. In fact, even now he's making these overtures. He's called for a new beginning for India and Pakistan. He's saying that it's vital for us to become good friends. But what credence can be placed on his proclamations of peace between India and Pakistan?
What Indian officials have told me is that even before trade, MFN status, and the reason why he could possibly push those three is that because the army also supports giving us MFN status. For the same reason, they accept that their economy has benefited from free trade agreements that they've signed elsewhere. But beyond that, I don't see any convergence between him and the army at all.
Right.
And it's very clear that in this, at press, for the time being at least, he has happily conceded all of this to the army. Because the last time he tried to challenge the army, he ended up being jailed and exiled. So he's not going to go down that path. Yes, he may be choosing a new army chief in November. He chose Musharraf. It didn't make any difference. Musharraf promptly was the one who overthrew him and exiled him. The army will do as it wants, and what he does, he has a limited choice of 10 corps commanders, whose mindset is more or less exactly the same.
Okay.
And the chief of general staff, who is the most likely candidate, traditionally that's the man who takes, is a direct protege of Kayani, and has, from what I've heard, more or less the same views as Kayani does on India. So therefore, we shouldn't expect very much forward movement on that front. And Sharif is saying, yes, new beginning, and then the subtext is in the areas that I have any control, which are limited to economics, trade, and a few people-to-people issues. So the army is just going to pursue, in my view, a policy regarding retaking Afghanistan, reheating Kashmir, and it's just going to tell Sharif, you can do what you want, but we're going to do all of this, and you can work your way around this, but ultimately it's not going to be based on what you accomplish with India. So my sense is that yes, there's no reason why we shouldn't talk with Pakistan, but let's understand that when they meet in September, the agenda is virtually going to be a blank sheet of paper and a photo op. There's going to be almost nothing on the table. Our Prime Minister is a lame duck. Sharif.
What can we expect then in such a scenario? We know the ability of Nawaz Sharif to mend fences with India, how far he can go on that front. In fact, there is no consensus among Pakistanis on this issue.
So to add to the complication that Praneeth mentioned, it's also not forget that Nawaz Sharif, though he may want to strengthen India-Pakistan relation, not because he's in favor of India-Pakistan relations, perhaps because he feels that would give him a leverage vis-a-vis military, But that card, I don't think he's going to play now. So he's going to keep quiet on that front. But the larger problem that he may face also is from his own Taliban, what is generally referred as the Pakistani Taliban, KTP. The last 3 days we have been seeing that he has stayed the hanging of those militants who have been awarded death sentences. It's giving a very wrong impression, or perhaps there was not perhaps there was a open threat from the TTP that if you hang those people who have been engaged in killing, the court have sentenced of death sentence. If you kill them or if you hang them, we'll come after you. You know, we'll come after the PM again, and then they have stayed this. So Nawaz Sharif, you know, what the point that Pramit made, that not only US, Afghanistan, India, and nuclear weapons, even he has his limitation even within. I don't think he'll be able to have a free hand vis-a-vis TTP or Balochistan or even Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or Durand, or you know, he is expecting Karzai to visit Islamabad very soon. Pakistan-Afghanistan relations is in a very bad shape. So Nawaz Sharif, unfortunately, though he may have the support of the people, perhaps the largest civil society, he will be extremely constrained. You know, I don't know what decision that he is going to make, he and his younger brother. US, Pakistan, vis-a-vis US, Afghanistan, India. Imagine as he goes down the path, as the energy crisis worsens, as the expectations of people increases and Taliban on a rampage, which I believe it would be. See that the TTP and Afghan Taliban, once the American troops leave, more than India and Kashmir, they will be at the receiving end. You know, they have already entered Punjab. Punjab, you know, Pakistani Punjab will be at the receiving end.
Right. In fact, Nawaz Sharif has called for talks with the extremists.
Given this condition, how strong Nawaz Sharif would be to take any substantial decision vis-a-vis India-Pakistan relationship. So I would rather see him as a lame duck Prime Minister even now.
Okay, but there are constraints on the Indian side as well, Mr. Sikri. Our Prime Minister wants to have friendly relations with Pakistan, but he is reined in by the pressure of the opposition, and also the public opinion.
Well, I think our expectations should be tempered by reality. I am not saying that there is no need for talks with Pakistan. The question always is, what are you going to talk about? And at what level are you going to talk?
Right.
I mean, there are channels open. We have diplomatic channels. We have at the military level the DGMOs. We have a back channel. You can, you know, so you can establish other channels at lower levels also. The doubt arises in my mind about whether, under the circumstances that we have just discussed, it is desirable, much less worthwhile, to have a meeting at the highest levels, at the summit level. Because the problem with summit level meetings is that they arouse expectations.
Right.
And when these are not fulfilled, or worse, if they lead to disasters because they are ill prepared, or because there is a personal
outcome. But when was the last set of
we shouldn't turn our back to
Pakistan?
Pakistan.
That's precisely the point.
Okay, on that note, it's time for us to take a break in the program. Stay with us. We'll be right back with the final segment of the show. For Insight, we are discussing India's relations with Pakistan. Mr. Pal Chaudhary, there's this perception, perhaps strengthened by the media, that India does not really have a Pakistan policy, and that there's a drift in the matter, and that we need a coherent, a strong policy towards Pakistan, and also that there is a divide between our official policy and the public opinion when it comes to Pakistan.
Well, let's put it this way. I think there's a general understanding within the consensus within the Indian system that the core of the problem in Pakistan is the army. And what we can do to discredit or weaken the army over time is something we should try to do. The question is the implementation of this policy has been haphazard. And I think we have rided very well off of the American presence in Afghanistan, which has thrown off Pakistan military's own strategic equations. That period is now coming to an end. My concern is that, my sense is that we have not worked out an alternative strategy to what happens after the Americans leave. Initially, our hope was that the Americans would maintain a very large troop presence of at least 20 to 30,000 troops after they leave, which would be enough to sustain special forces attacks and so on. That seems unlikely now. Obama is essentially an isolationist in his mentality. The sense is that America must pull all of its troops back home. We're now increasingly worried